Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a $50 deck tech. When I say $50, I mean that is an overall deck cost. Both shipping and commanders that are $10 or less are going to be included in that cost, but basic lands will not be. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible because of viewers like you. So if you're looking for some easy ways to help support the show, make sure you like this episode and share it with friends. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Another easy way to support this channel is by using our TCGplayer affiliate links. So make sure that you're looking for those links in the description whenever you're buying a deck or just individual cards. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Today's deck tech comes to you courtesy of Eric. Eric has been supporting the show for over a year now as a general tier patron. I really couldn't do this without amazing patrons like Eric. So for Eric's personalized deck tech, he chose Mathas Fiend Seeker, focusing on curses. Mathas is a 3/3 vampire with menace that costs red, white, black. He has at the beginning of your end step put a bounty counter on target creature an opponent controls for as long as that creature has a bounty counter on it. It has when this creature dies, each opponent draws a card and gains 2 life. So Mathas is a commander that can incentivize your opponents to do your dirty work for you. When you put a bounty counter on a creature, you're incentivizing each other player to destroy that creature to get that value. You're basically putting a target on that creature by essentially cursing them. And Mardu has some of the best colors when it comes to actual curses. So what's our strategy with this deck? Well, we're going to incentivize our opponents with curses and bounties. This deck is going to let our opponents do our dirty work for us. If we want a creature dealt with, we're going to put a bounty on them. And if we want an opponent dealt with, we'll put a curse on them. And then how do we win with this deck? Well, we're going to wipe our opponents out with some powerful curses and enchantments. Some of these effects can be absolutely brutal. It can really end the game quickly for our opponents. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start off with tactic number 1, start the hunt. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice to put a basic land into play tapped. Next up, there's Prismatic Lens, which costs 2, taps for 1, and can help filter our mana. And then Star Compass may enter the battlefield tapped, but it can tap for any of our colors depending on our land situation. And then we're going to be running all 3 Signets with Orzhov, Rakdos, and Boros. By paying 1 into them and tapping them, they're going to add their guild's colors. Next up, we're running 2 of the Talismans with Talisman of Hierarchy and Talisman of Conviction. Each can either tap for a colorless or can tap for 1 of 2 colors, but it deals 1 damage to us. And then we've got some ways to reduce the cost of some of our spells with Starfield Mystic and Danitha Capuchin Paragon. Starfield Mystic says, enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Starfield Mystic. And then Danitha Capuchin says, or an equipment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So both these can save us a ton of mana throughout the game by reducing the cost of our curses. Speaking of curses, we've even got a few that can help us ramp too. Curse of Opulence costs a red, and it says, enchant player. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, create a colorless artifact token named Gold. It has sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. So this can be a fantastic early play to put a target on someone's back and to generate a lot of mana. And then there's a Cursed Witch, which has spells your opponents cast that target a Cursed Witch cost 1 less to cast. When it dies, you return to the battlefield transformed under your control attached to target opponent. It transforms into Infectious Curse, which says spells you cast that target enchanted player cost 1 less to cast, and at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So again, this is another great way to reduce the cost of our curses too. But now that we've ramped, it's really time for us to get into the curses. So let's go through some of them now in tactic number 2, a curse upon you. First up is actually the golden pig of this deck, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the golden pig for this deck is Curse of Misfortunes. It's an aura curse for 4 and a black, and it says enchant player. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a curse card that doesn't have the same name as a curse attached to enchanted player, put it onto the battlefield, attach to that player, then shuffle your library. So essentially this can help us get some of our best curses and pile them up onto 1 player. We can turn that player into a huge target and have them easily taken out by everyone. For just 5 mana, we're going to get multiple tutors for our best curses, and we get to cheat them into play, and that's why it's the golden pig. Some of those curses have attack incentives like Curse of Chaos. It says whenever a player attacks enchanted player with 1 or more creatures, that attacking player may discard a card. If that player does, they draw a card. So rummaging might not be the most powerful thing, but it can definitely be an incentive. Another incentive comes with Curse of Stalked Prey. It says whenever a creature deals combat damage to enchanted player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So this can give incentive and make those creatures even deadlier the next time they come through. We also have some ways to give our opponents creatures with Curse of Shallow Graves and Curse of Disturbance. Curse of Shallow Grave says whenever a player attacks enchanted creature with 1 or more creatures, that attacking player may put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. Curse of Disturbance essentially does the exact same thing, but even better because it gives us a zombie token too. And finally, there's Curse of the Nightly Hunt, which can really throw a wrench into our opponent's plans. It says creatures enchanted player controls attack each combat a Fable. So this can force an opponent into some unfavorable attacks and leave them wide open. But we're not quite done with curses just yet. So let's take a look at some more in tactic number 3, A Cursed Life. First up, there's Curse of Vengeance, which can provide us a ton of value. It says whenever enchanted player casts a spell, put a spite counter on Curse of Vengeance. And whenever enchanted player loses the game, you gain X life, draw X cards, where X is the number of spite counters on Curse of Vengeance. So if we can get this on a player early, we can gain a lot of value when they die. Next up, there's Curse of Exhaustion, which can really slow down one of our opponents. It says enchanted player can't cast more than one spell each turn. Some decks depend on that, and this can really shut them down. And then we're going to be running Curse of Death's Hold, which says creatures enchanted player controls get -1/-1. So we're going to be weakening one of our opponent's creatures, and this is especially effective against token builds. If they're trying to create a bunch of 1/1s, they're not going to be creating anything. Next up, we've got some curses that damage an opponent with Curse of the Pierced Heart, Curse of Thirst, and Curse of Bloodletting. Curse of the Pierced Heart says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, Curse of the Pierced Heart deals 1 damage to that player. Curse of Thirst says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, Curse of Thirst deals damage to that player equal to the number of curses on them. And then Curse of Bloodletting says if a source would deal damage to enchanted player, it deals double that damage to that player instead. So this can be a heavy incentive for people to double up on their damage and really take a player out. We've also got some ways to drain an opponent too, with Trespasser's Curse and Curse of Fool's Wisdom. Trespasser's Curse says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under enchanted player's control, that player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So again, against a token build, this can be especially effective. And then Curse of Fool's Wisdom says whenever enchanted player draws a card, they lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. Against the right deck, this card can be absolutely brutal. And finally, we've got 2 more brutal cards with Torment of Scarabs and Cruel Reality. Torment of Scarabs says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. And then Cruel Reality doesn't give them that choice. It says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. If they can't, they lose 5 life. Now, outside of actual curses, we've got some cards that aren't technically considered curses, but they're pretty much just curses. So let me show you in tactic number 4, Kind of a Curse. First up, there's Xantcha's Sleeper Agent. She's a 5/5 minion, and when she enters the battlefield, an opponent of your choice gains control of it. Xantcha attacks each combat of Fable and can attack its owner or planeswalkers its owner controls. And then for 3, Xantcha's controller loses 2 life and you draw a card. Any player may activate this ability. So this is a creature that is forced to attack anyone but you. On top of that, lets anyone pay mana in exchange for its controller losing 2 life. This is a huge incentive, and it's going to drain out an opponent very quickly. Another non-curse that's pretty much just a curse is Captive Audience. It says Captive Audience enters the battlefield under the control of an opponent of your choice. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Your life total becomes 4, discard your hand, or each opponent creates 5 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. When you put this on your most threatening opponent, you are really hampering them. No matter what they choose, they're going to be in big trouble, and they're going to be dead pretty quickly. And another way to speed things up is with Bitter Feud. When it enters the battlefield, you choose 2 players. If a source controlled by one of the chosen players would deal damage to the other chosen player, or a permanent that player controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. So essentially you're doubling up things for 2 players against each other. Next up, there's Blind Obedience, which is a fantastic card in this deck. It has Extort, so that's a great way for you to drain your opponents throughout the game. And on top of that, artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. This can be a fantastic way to slow things down and to control the game more easily. And then there's Tainted Remedy, which says if an opponent would gain life, that player loses that much life instead. This can be absolutely backbreaking against certain decks. It can also hamstring your opponents so they can't get out of the position that they're in. On top of that, this even allows you to finish off your opponents with your bounties. And finally, we're going to be running Bloodthirsty Blade. It's an equipment and says equipped creature gets +2/+0 and is goated. By paying 1, you can attach Bloodthirsty Blade to target creature an opponent controls, but you can only activate this ability anytime you can cast a sorcery. This is a fantastic, repeatable way to goad your opponent's creatures that can really come in handy in combination with the bounties. But we've got plenty of other ways to force our opponents to swing elsewhere. Let's go through them now in tactic number 5, Come At Me. First up, we've got Baird Steward of Archive and Archive of Absolution, which each do the exact same thing in this deck. They make it so that creatures can't attack us or a planeswalker we control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. 1 might not seem like a lot, but that kind of taxing effect can be a fantastic deterrent. Some better versions of this effect come from Ghostly Prison and Sphere of Safety. Ghostly Prison says, creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control is attacking you. And Sphere of Safety has an even bigger effect with this deck. It says, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. We're running an incredible amount of enchantments in this deck, so once this is down, creatures are not coming our way. So taxing is one way that we can disincentivize attacks. Another way is pain. Cards like Hissing Miasma, Blood Reckoning, and Marchese's Decree are fantastic ways to deter attacks. Hissing Miasma says, whenever a creature attacks you, its controller loses 1 life. Blood Reckoning does the same, but it also works for planeswalkers too. And Marchese's Decree is the same as Blood Reckoning, but it also says when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. So if you're able to protect yourself and hold on to the Monarch, you can gain a lot of card advantage throughout the game. An even better version of these effects comes with Revenge of Ravens. It says whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that creature's controller loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's a 2 life swing every single time a creature swings at you. And finally, a good way to deter attacks is to have a huge army yourself. Sigil the Empty Throne is an absolute bomb in this deck. It says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. With this deck, this can get out of hand quickly since we're running so many enchantments. Not only can these angels defend you, but they can also be great threats too and finish off your opponents. But to get to all these great cards, we need to draw into them with more than just our commander's bounty triggers. So now it's time for us to move on to tactic number 6, Explore and Enchant. First up, there's Mesa Enchantress, which says, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. Again, with the number of enchantments that we're running, this can draw us a ton of cards throughout the game. Next up, there's Cathartic Reunion, which makes us discard 2 cards in exchange for drawing 3. And then we've got some spells that draws cards at the cost of life with Sign in Blood and Read the Bones. Sign in Blood makes target player draw 2 and lose 2, and Read the Bones lets us scry 2, draw 2 cards, and lose 2 life. Continuing on this trend, we're also running Ancient Craving and Ambition's Cost, which make us draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. And an even bigger version of this comes with Necrologia. It's kind of a strange card because it's an instant, but you can only cast it during your end step. As an additional cost to cast it, you pay X life and then you draw X cards. This is a fantastic way to dig through your deck and to replenish your hand. 1 life for 1 card is absolutely nothing in Commander, and you're going to make that deal every day. But sometimes digging through your deck isn't enough and you need to get a very specific card. So let's go through some ways to do that in tactic number 7, Curse Catchers. First up, there's Heliod's Pilgrim, which says, when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an aura card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this can help us get the right curse that we need for the situation that we're in. And a bigger way for us to do this is with 3 Dreams. It says, search your library for up to 3 aura cards with different names, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. So for 5 mana, we get to tutor for 3 curses, and that's a fantastic deal. And finally, we've got a very straightforward tutor with Diabolic Tutor. For 4 mana, it's going to get us any card in our deck. So if we want to, this can get us a curse, or can even get us something else. This can even get us something to get back our curses. So let's go through those things now in tactic number 8, The Curse Lives. First up, there's Crystal Chimes, which we can pay 3 to tap and sacrifice it to return all enchantment cards from our graveyard to our hand. This is a fantastic way to not only get our curses back, but all of our enchantments back from our graveyard too. But another great way for us to actually get them back is with Tiana Ship's Caretaker. She has whenever an aura or equipment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So as long as we can keep her in play, even if our auras are dealt with, we can still get them back. So this can provide us a ton of value throughout the game. But another way for us to get value throughout the game is with those bounties. So let's go through some ways to do that in tactic number 9, Collect the Bounty. First up, there's Crackling Doom, which is going to deal 2 damage to each opponent, and then each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. Most of the time, we're going to be putting bounties on our opponent's biggest threats anyways. This is an easy way for us to deal with them and collect. Next up, there's Divine Reckoning, which makes each player choose a creature they control, and we destroy the rest. On top of that, we can flash this back and do it again. By targeting one opponent's creatures with a lot of bounties, we can get a lot of value with this. And finally, we're running Fumigate, which can just give us a lot of value in general. It's going to destroy all creatures, and we gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. So with this in combination with the bounties, we're going to draw a lot of cards and gain even more life. But outside of these wraps, we've got some targeted spells too. So let's go over them in our final tactic, tactic number 10, Get Out of Here. First up, there's D-Spark, which is going to exile target permanent with converted mana cost of 4 or greater. Most of the time, the biggest threats out there are going to meet those requirements. And when they don't, we can use something like Oblation. Oblation says the owner of target non-land permanent shuffles it into their library, then draws 2 cards. If we're desperate to draw some cards too, we can even shuffle in one of our own permanents as well. And finally, there's Generous Gift, which destroys target permanent and its controller gets a 3/3 elephant creature token. The 3/3 is absolutely nothing in Commander, and it's just another target for one of our bounties. I've never had the chance to build a Curses deck, and this deck was a ton of fun to build. Again, a huge thanks to Eric for supporting this channel for over a year now as a general tier patron. If you want to support this channel or want your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you, consider becoming a patron. But now that we've gone through the spells in this deck, let's go on to the mana base. First up, we've got Exotic Orchard, which can tap for any of our colors most of the time. Next up, there's Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, which we can tap to sacrifice them to search our library for basic land and put into play tapped. And then there's Tainted Field, which can tap for colors or it can tap for white or black if we have a swamp. Next up, we've got 3 lands that enter the battlefield tapped and tap for either white or black mana. And then we've got 5 lands that enter the battlefield tapped and tap for either black or red mana. Next up, there's Nomad Outpost, which enters the battlefield tapped and taps for any of our colors. And then we're running our 3 Vivid lands with Vivid Marsh, Vivid Meadow, and Vivid Crag. Finally, we're going to be running 21 basic lands, 11 of those will be a swamp, 8 will be a plains, and 2 will be a mountain. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Mathas EDH rec deck will set you back $197.98. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at $49.88. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are built to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, let's upgrade this deck by adding in Felwar Stone and taking out Star Compass. Next up, we're going to put in Anguished Unmaking by taking out Oblation. And then we're going to add in Bounty Hunter and take out Bitter Feud. Next up, we're putting in Kolrath Knight and taking out Baird Steward of Argive. And then let's add in Overwhelming Splendor by taking out Archon of Absolution. Finally, let's add in Open the Vaults and take out Crystal Chimes. And now it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what you think about this deck and what you think about the Commander in general. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget Commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.